Okay, I'm still trying to find out if that's a real animal.
It's not real.
No.
No, I thought it looked like a bit of a stinky sock or something with two antlers on it.
Just a minute.
The legendary jackalope.
Jackalope. Yeah. Here in South Africa, we got something called the tokoloshi. Can you pronounce that, Ed? Tokoloshi.
Takaloshi.
Tokoloshi, yeah. Okay. So the tokoloshi is like a small little demon-like creature, also with little horns. Okay. And our folk here, our tribal folk here in South Africa, okay, believe that they have to put their beds on 3 bricks in order for the tokoloshi not to jump on. True story. That is a true story.
I saw 4 lions attack a honey badger. Guess who won?
The badger.
Honey badger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They finally
Yeah.
said, whoa, we're out of here.
No, we got badgers here in this country, and they hectic animals. Let me tell you. Are we ready? Ah, there we are. Okay. Right, there we are. Okay, Sandy, can I go?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So good morning, folks. Sandy has already docked me some pay here because I've said good evening every time. So my apologies to you guys there on the wrong side of the world. Okay. Um, and thank you for giving me the first speaker to this evening. As you know, I have got well, it's not so bad at the moment. I've had some pain pills. That's why I'm probably so happy, guys. But I've had severe tooth pain this today and through the whole weekend, and I'm not well at the moment. But my dentist has said he will be able to see me because he likes me a lot. Maybe it's because I'm his bank manager as well. Who knows? Okay, money talks. But anyway, so be it as it may, I'm going to see the dentist tomorrow, and please pray for me. I know you guys all love the dentist, but I really don't. Okay, he's a great guy. Okay, but yeah, for me, I don't want to be sick. And that's probably why, yeah, I just want to stay away from people who want to do stuff to me. Anyway, so let us pray together this morning. Our Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to come together as friends, Lord, and to once again express our joy in this Feast of Tabernacles. And Lord, this morning as I reflect on the three angels' message, Lord, please help me to walk through this with your grace. And Lord, I thank you for these people that are on here, that are watching, these dear friends of ours. And Lord, a rich blessing on them as we call on your blessings during tabernacles. For those that are watching also out there on YouTube, Lord, I pray a very special blessing for them and that you be in their hearts during this time. Be with Sandy and the ministry, Lord, as well, and be with everybody that supports Bible exploration. We ask this in the mighty name of Yeshua. Amen. So this specific presentation, because I wouldn't like to say sermon, I don't really like to do sermons, is actually a type of sermon. I have rewritten this to something it wasn't when it started. And so you will see as I go through it, there are leftovers, but I've actually over the weekend while I was listening to you guys, I was really trying to get this into something I wanted to convey, and I prayed, and the Lord then put this message, really gave me this message. And it comes out of that little book I showed you, the first presentation I did on WhatsApp, Vatican II, the one that deals with the 300th message. And it's strange, that I had read it a while ago, and so I put it down, and it was lying here, and I'm looking for things to put together, and I had literally had 129 slides, but not going anywhere. It was just ideas and things like that, and I opened this book, and I read the preface in this book. And so this presentation is going to be based partly on this book, and I'm going to read from it as well because it was written probably when was this written? 19, I think, yeah, it was 1960. That was 1979. 1979 was this book was written, I think, if I look at here. Um, and so you would all know Robert Falkenberg, I would assume. Um, he was the president of the Upper Columbia Conference. His dad was a GC president. He served for 4 years as the associate director for SHAME, a worldwide ministry of the California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He spent 9 years as a missionary in the Chinese field, okay, in various capacities, and 2 years as pastor in the Florida Conference, okay. I believe he recently passed away, if I read the things correctly. But as an Adventist through the years, okay, we talk a lot about the three angels message, which is the heart of Adventism, which is the name of the book. And it is strange, we have these very beautiful, dramatic revelation seminars, and we tell people all these truths about what's going on in the world. And sometimes I think the revelation seminars tend to lose Jesus in the translation a bit. Yeah, but that's just my personal feeling. Please, just a disclaimer, anything I say is my thoughts and my thoughts alone. Might not necessarily be what Bible Explorations or the people here are watching. They are just my thoughts on the subject. And so, reading from the preface of this book, it says the following: the heart of our message is and always will be Jesus Christ. He is the center and the core of our faith. Without him, his life, death, and resurrection, no book ever written on him or anything that we say would have any worth. The heart of our message is about a person, a real man who existed since time immemorial as the Son of God, who gave up his exalted station at the center of heaven and became a poor, humble man, that he might become the Lamb of God who would take away the sins of the world. And that's in John 1:29. So Jesus points to the centrality of his being and the mission when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus isn't a way or a truth or one of the many kinds of life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And so Ellen White puts his eternal puts this as an eternal fact and supreme fact. She states that Christ, his character and work, is the center and circumference of all truth. He is the chain upon which the jewels of doctrine are linked. In him is found the complete system of truth. And when I was reflecting on that, I just it brought such joy in my life again, because to understand that truth is so complete and so pure reminded me of when I first laid eyes on the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the people in the church. Because that's honestly what I believe that the people there was. I believe that, and I still do to an extent today believe, present company included, that Adventists really are a remnant people. And that of that, it somehow, as it says in 2 Peter, that it places us as a unique, a different people, a unique people. So Jesus is the center of Adventism. We can say what we like, and I've many times said I don't want to be an Adventist. I don't want to put a tag on myself. I don't want to be associated with the church because of everything that has happened. But really, at the heart of it, what else can we be? We might not be very popular with our brethren in the official church, but we are still very much part of Adventism. So Jesus is also the center of Adventism. Take Jesus out of our teaching, we lose the heartbeat of our salvation. We lose our peace, our joy, and our only hope. Actually, we also lose the true power in our message. After all, Jesus said that it was when he is lifted up, when the everlasting good news of Christ and him crucified is proclaimed to the world, it is then that all people will be drawn unto him. And so why I wrote the everlasting gospel down there is because of the comments that come to us as feast keepers. And people dramatically say, you know, um, if you have a message of the feasts, then you are no longer proclaiming the everlasting gospel. Well, we know that cannot be so, because the gospel also goes through a cycle, and the cycle is called the three angels message. So on the slides you can see there obviously the everlasting gospel. The center pillar of that is Revelation 14:6, when it starts off by saying, "When I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people." Is it not wonderful that we can be here today? For me, it is just absolutely fantastic. Takes away all my aches and pains to be here with you today, to listen to people who understand what that is. And so the message of the three angels is proclaimed with a loud voice. And this is very important and urgent message that the whole world must hear. This message is the everlasting gospel. That is the good news of the salvation by grace through sacrifice of Jesus. And once again, I want to really underpin that as a community who utilizes the holy convocations as part of their worship, because that is what we believe. The everlasting gospel, that is the good news of salvation by grace through the sacrifice of Jesus. It is everlasting, and it was planned before time began. It has never changed, and it won't change. And the everlasting life depends on accepting or rejecting it. But where did we start? And as I started off there by saying, okay, on my first slide, are we there yet? So you can hardly imagine a more depressing and hopeless situation in the year of 1903. Even an optimistic glance into the future would reveal nothing but uncertainty. If, on the other hand, you would be a pessimist, the same glance would spell a certain denominational bankruptcy and theological fragmentation. The facts were such that the church prepared to convene their 35th General Conference session on March 27, 1903. The bleak future of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was at stake. So let's start with the financial disarray that faced the church at that time. When the General Conference President A.G. Daniels took office in 1901, he discovered that the church was in a major financial crisis. It operated without any working budgets. As a result, the church was regularly incurring indebtedness to build new institutions or to renovate older ones, as well as to meet day-to-day operational expenses. The debt was astounding. Church historian Arthur White paints a clear picture of the financial situation that faced the church as they prepared to meet their yearly session. The wage of ordained ministers and skilled workmen in the publishing house was only $12 to $15 per week. Yet the debts on the educational institutions amounted to $350,000 in 1903. The General Conference Association owed $280,000. By the end of 1902, the debts of the association exceeded the assets by $7,400. The General Conference itself was overdrawn in its accounts by 41,500. The Battle Creek Sanitarium was carrying a debt of 250,000. So you can imagine the dismay and gloom that pressed in on each of these delegates as they convened their annual General Conference. Of course, there was the Review and Herald publishing house that had burned down in those times as well. So the church was really staggering. It was falling, as that famous saying goes as well. The question it asks, will the church fall? So besides the financial crisis that the church was facing, it also was at a huge risk of losing most of its health institutions. At that time, the properties were not registered legally as belonging to the denomination, but were rather owned by individual constituencies that had personally invested in the institution through purchase of shares that had been sold to raise the needed capital. And folks, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow night as well, because I'm going to show you some things around the church that you might or might not know. We've got to understand that in most countries, church properties don't belong to the local church. It doesn't even belong to the local conference. It's actually set into private companies. And the reason for it is there are legal reasons for it, but it also has placed the church at risk. And I'll tell that story tomorrow night. So also most health institutions operated by the church were under management of oversight that was called the International Medical Missionary and Benevolent Association. This association headed by, of course, John Harvey Kellogg, was gradually distancing itself from the denomination. One example of this distancing was its board of directors passing resolutions stating unequivocally that the institutions were to carry out their work independent of any sectarian or denominational control. Read the start of what did they do? What is the big thing in well before your law changed it? Okay, I'll leave that there. Um, so as you can see there, in 1903, it says that the result of the last General Conference has been the greatest and the most terrible sorrow in my life. No change was made. The spirit that should have been brought into the work as a result of that meeting was not brought in because men did not receive the testimonies of the Spirit of God. And I think it was Tom that was speaking about the spirit of prophecy, okay, and how people operate through that. This was not evident in those meetings because there was a lot of infighting during that time. There was a lot of jockeying for position. And I must be honest, I don't think it's changed over the years. So and that was actually written Ellen White to a son, to J. Arthur, to J. Arthur. And in 1903, Ellen White and other church leaders was watching helplessly as Kellogg, refusing to accept the input from either church pioneer and profit from the church elected leaders, took one step after another, separating himself from the Battle Creek Sanatorium of the church. The loss to the church over the next few years in terms of finances, leadership, and membership was huge. For Ellen White, the loss was also deeply personal because she had known that and had worked not only with John Harvey Kellogg since he was a child, but with his parents and siblings as well. As she thought in 1903 about, or thought about in 1903 about all the possible turning events that might have brought about different ending to the sad story, she focused her attention on the GC session of 1901. If only Kellogg and his supporters had humbled themselves and entered into the spirit of the occasion as others had done, the medical work and Kellogg himself might have been saved. But there was enough blame to go around, and so the GC leaders had also failed to treat Kellogg and his associate with kindness and humility. But whoever was to blame, Ellen White was heartbroken. And you know, that seems to be the theme of the church through the years when you read the history. 1888 was the sign, 1893, 1895, 1901, like it says here, 1919, 1931. All of these things came up. 1958, questions on doctrine. Um, so all of these things came up, and it was all self-inflicted. Nobody was to blame for it except the people in leadership and the people that supported them. And so sometimes when I hear pronouncements around where sin comes from and who's responsible for what and etc., I tend to think about it, and I always bring it back to one thing: the person. Who's responsible for their own lives? I don't go and look for things that are not there. I don't I'm a pragmatist and a realist. I've worked in the secular life for 40 years I can spot a snake in a suit, if you want to call it that. I can spot evil, I can see it, and I did not learn it in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I learned it long before I got to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So, getting back to it. So this story then at the 1903 conference becomes really, really interesting because Elder Jones, Daniels, Ellen White, they were all there. Kellogg was there. There was big fights going on, folks. If you ever read the history, that's sort of the nearest picture I could get to that time. I think that was when Ellen White. I can't think that this in 1903 because I think she was in Australia then. Uh, but I can tell you one thing: these guys were really not happy with each other. There were factions within the church, and really it was as though the Lord had stepped back from the church. So let me ask you a question. What issue did they tackle first? Would you think it would be about the bankruptcy, financial crisis in the church? Where would you start? Would it be about Kellogg and the heaps of trouble he was causing the church, the amounts of money going out of the church? Would it be about the membership that was at that stage dormant? It wasn't going anywhere. People weren't coming into the church. The internal politics, leadership. What would you think? Okay. So they they sort of prayed about it before the conference. All right. And they did not look at any of these things. Instead, what they did first is they studied mission. The first full 2 days of the historic General Conference session was dedicated solely to the study of the three angels' messages and how the church could finish the work that God had commissioned it to accomplish. In other words, they focused on their mission, our mission. At that dangerous juncture in the church's history, the delegate corporately turned their attention to why the Seventh-day Adventist denomination existed, why they were who they were. After all, the reason they had assembled to tackle major problems facing the church was not to salvage institutions made of brick and mortar. They weren't there to preserve jobs or even change or balance budgets. They started the conference by placing at the front and center of the agenda the mission for which the church was called into existence. The delegates understood that they were focusing their mission and how vital that was for their survival and therefore their church's survival. Because the church is made up of people. The same is true today. At the time when the church is facing increasingly theological, financial, and missiological challenges from within and without, we must drop all secondary obsessions, whatever good they might be, to make sure that we're focusing on our core mission. And so we have to understand the issues around the church in 2022. We have to understand that there are what is called present truth, which is very different to 1903. We must understand that a lot of people have left the church, but they have not left the faith. Instead, they now run missions outside of the church. And I wonder what Ellen White would have said of that. I seriously wonder what she would have said, and if she would have even been a member anymore. We must both corporately and individually, and I'm not talking about us, okay, as members of Christ's remnant, know and understand why we are here and what we have been called to do as a combined people, as individual members of the body of Christ. So, why is it so important? Because if we ignore or misunderstand our core mission, I would submit to you that we cannot accept God's blessing to be with us as a people. You know, when I read this and I think about this book being written 30 or 35 years ago, whenever it was written, okay, it really, it's like it's fresh. It's like it's right now. The church is in flux. We are treading water. We are, in some cases, scared of the world out there. I remember so clearly a story that was told a number of years ago at a camp meeting that I was, just how courageous uh, the pioneers were when they went into towns and they had to speak to people and bring the gospel to them. It took a lot of courage to go into an area where Methodist or any of those type of churches were dominant and try and speak to those members. You can only think of the sort of pushback that they would have gotten from those opposing churches. But our mission, the proclamation of the three angels' message to the entire world, can be summarized succinctly into remembering the two Old Testament prophetic messages. And the first, the challenge of Amos, the prophet, prepare to meet your God. And I think we spoke about it during this week as well. Sandy mentioned that, you know, when 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 you pass away, your probation has closed. Now, your first message to anybody is get right with the Lord. Is that not? And then the powerful and clear message of Elijah to the multitude gathered on Mount Carmel. And it said, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if it's Baal, then follow him. The distinct and all-important mission is laid out in no uncertain terms by Ellen White when she says, the truth for this time, the third angel's message, is to be proclaimed with a loud voice, meaning increasing power. And as we approach the great final test, the present truth for this time comprises the messages, the third angel's message succeeding the first and the second. The presentation of this message, with all its embraces, is our work. We stand as a remnant people in these last days to promulgate the truth and swell the cry of third angel's wonderful distinct message, giving the trumpet a certain sound. And when I think about it and I think of trumpets and atonement and tabernacles, I cannot believe that people cannot see it. That it's part of that message. That if I want to use Adrian Evans's channel, it's a channel of the messages. It's the way we worship. I cannot see people talking against that. And we stand as a remnant people, the people here, in these last days to promulgate the truth and swell the cry of the third angel's wonderful distinct message, giving the trumpet a certain sound. Eternal truth, which we have adhered to from the beginning, is to be maintained in all its increasing importance to the close of probation. The trumpet is to give a certain and a very clear sound. So to get back to that 1903 session, for 2 days the delegates reviewed and discussed and recommitted themselves to this foundational mission of the church. They focused on the centrality of the marching orders given to the church. They knew that they were not alone. They knew that the Lord God had called the denomination to existence for a clear purpose, although at the time they faced seemingly insurmountable problems. He would be with them even to the end of the age. And only after they had thoroughly re-embraced their calling as a people did they go forward and boldly deal with the immediate financial, organizational, and theological problems. You know, it is for me one of the most beautiful examples in Adventism of how we as a people can stand together. Here I will give Satan some credit. He's doing a very good job in splitting us up. He really does. But we must be cognizant and realistic about what is happening in the world. Now, you live in a different part of the world than I do, and my brothers here on the African continent. We know that we have different issues, different stories, different backgrounds. Some of us only recently became Seventh-day Adventists. We've gone through heartache with the church, disappointment. But the very big thing is there's always been somehow a messenger in our lives, somebody who's been there and touched us, somebody like Elder John van der Berg, who just through his simple acceptance of somebody has shown the love of Christ. And so let's quickly run through the three angels' message. Of course, in Revelation 12, Church History 101, the purpose of this uh, overview that we give here surrounds the three angels' messages in the book of Revelation. The narrative of Revelation 12 to 14 covers the history of the church from the time of Christ down to his glorious second coming. The story begins with a woman. It's not an average woman, but one clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. A woman is often used in the Bible as a symbol of God's people, and we see this both in the Old and New Testaments, Isaiah 54:6, Jeremiah 3:20, 2 Corinthians 11:2, Ephesians 5:25. But God's people are not always faithful. And so prophetically, an apostate fallen church is depicted in this dramatically different way, not as a pure woman, but rather as a prostitute or a harlot. Hosea 1 verses 2 and Revelation 17:1. The church of Revelation 12 includes the faithful who exist before the New Testament church, for this is the woman who gave birth to the child Jesus. After all, when Christ was born, there was no New Testament church. Rather, the woman represented God's faithful at the time of his birth. People such as Joseph and Mary, Zacharias and Elizabeth. In essence, the prophetic picture which we find in Revelation 12 portrays the stream of God's faithful people into which God brings forth his Son, the child Jesus. When he's introduced in the story, another character comes to the fore, the devil, Satan, the adversary, also referred to as the dragon. And after the birth of Christ, the dragon tries to destroy the Christ child, but is unsuccessful. God protects his son by whisking him away to Egypt to escape the jealousy of Herod. In the end, having conquered sin and death itself, Jesus is caught up to God in heaven, now completely out of the reach out of the devil and his demons. Angry that the Son of God has escaped his grasp, the dragon now turns his wrath on Christ's church, the woman, in Revelation 12:13. And she flees to the wilderness where she is protected, much like Elijah of old was protected when escaping from Baal worshipping King Ahab. She flees into her God-prepared wilderness for 1,260 prophetic days or years. From the fall of the Roman Empire and the setting up of the religious leadership of which now the Roman Catholic Church, God's faithful church, suffers persecution and religious oppression for that period of 1,260 years, from AD 538 until AD 1798. Through this time, God's faithful people become the dragon, not by their own merits or strength, but rather by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Of course, Revelation 13 focuses attention on the dragon's strategy and the destruction aimed at Christ's last day faithful, which is us. The prophecy begins filling in more detail that surrounded the wilderness persecution from the church from AD 538 to AD 1798. The persecuting beast is described as receiving power directly from the dragon itself. This sea beast, a composite of three animals, a leopard, bear, and lion, speaks great things, blasphemies, and exerts an uncontested power for 42 months, identical to 1,260 days, and which point it is receives a deadly wound, momentarily stopping it in its tracks. However, the beast would quickly recover and open its mouth to blaspheme God's name and his tabernacle and those who dwell in heaven. Revelation 13:6. The wound that the sea beast received would not be deadly. In fact, it was only a temporary setback. Beginning within a few years and continuing throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the papacy had been preparing and regaining lost ground. Now, whatever the Pope or the papacy goes and whatever it does, it receives world news coverage. And I'll show you some of that tomorrow night. The world truly wonders after the beast. The world is the wound is almost healed, and its reputation is seemingly, and I say seemingly, restored. However, the story of the sea beast is still not finished. Revelation 13:8 states that this sea beast will be worshipped by all who dwell on earth, except by those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. We have not yet seen this take place. There is now a new worldwide respect for his power. There are even attempts by various religious bodies to rejoin the Catholic Mother Church. Folks, that is a very real reality for the Adventists. There are however, the world at this time does not worship this power. Revelation tells us that this global worship will happen. It will need cooperation from another beast and can call that earth beast or lamb-like beast. So that beast is obviously also in Revelation 13:11. This earth beast is similar to the sea beast in that it too has a political religious character. This earth beast must come to prominence after the sea beast's deadly wound or after 1798. It must also come into existence in an area that's lightly populated as opposed to the sea beast that comes up through the sea. And we all know that we believe that that is the United States of America. To continue, and Satan's final push to ensnare the whole world in his diabolical net, he empowers this earth beast to perform stunning and persuasive miracles. And I must say, I saw stuff today. I was talking was it to Philip? Can't remember. I was talking to somebody, and I was watching a thing that was being given by my company. And it's these new virtual worlds called the metaverse. I don't know if you folks have heard of the metaverse. There's a film called, or a film, it was Avatar, was the film, okay? Which these people take on, you do what is it? An avatar. You basically create the avatar of yourself. These worlds are now in existence. They are still in development, but you can join many of them now. You can own land in them, okay? There is so much unreal stuff. That's the only thing there's currency in it. Um, there's just so much stuff in there. And they were showing us today how banking is going to work within the metaverse. Folks, the end times are coming very quickly. Let me assure you. Because what I'm seeing here is the control that will be um, put out there is here. It's here already. And although we cannot realize the depth of it, I can tell you that there are other players that Adventists have not even considered behind these things. And so, as we said, there's Satan's final push to ensnare the world in his diabolical net. He empowers this earth to perform stunning and persuasive miracles, and the metaverse is one. The example mentioned in the narrative, especially frightening, is that the earth beast performs great signs so that even uh, makes fire come down from heaven uh, on the earth in the sight of men. Think of it. What other prominent story in the Bible includes somebody calling fire down from heaven? Of course, it's Elijah on Mount Carmel. However, in a surprising twist, though, at the end of time, the fire from heaven that's called down by the earth beast falls on the wrong altar. Now, the forces of evil, Satan and his servant beasts, perform a godly miracle in the sight of all people, and multitudes are deceived. The only ones who are not deceived are the remnant, who hold on to Jesus as their Lord and the Savior, who worship and submit to Him by keeping His commandments. And I haven't given it much thought, but this metaverse, do you know the miracles you can create within it? You can create a whole new personality for yourself. You can create a whole new life. It all works through virtual. Think of it. Think of the control that can be exercised on you. Think of being part of something that's not real, touchable, but just in your mind. And so ask yourself, where is Satan going to be the most effective to strike? Your mind. And especially if your mind is engaged in something that is now linked to millions and millions of computers. It also talks to buying and selling, by the way. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's some stuff I saw this afternoon. I don't want to comment on that. But yeah, just very different from the stuff you see at Revelation seminars at the moment. My point is that we should not expect that either the papacy or its allies will perform miracles that are clearly evil or grotesque. Please note that. Okay? This stuff looks fantastic. It's pitched at it will improve your life. It is going to create possibilities for your children. You are going to be property owners. You are going to be wealthy. You are going to be healthy. That's the pitch. And let me tell you, where we are at the moment, the world is in such trouble, financially, health-wise, and everywhere else. And so people are going to grab this. They really are. So what they say and what they do will carry a godly flair. There will be enough good in the mix to deceive those who are grasping for politically correct yet righteous middle ground. The situation during the last days of earth will grow so intense and dangerous for God's people that they will, under economic boycott, and even receive the death penalty if they do not comply in their worship of the sea beast. And that worship can come through many channels, as I've just said. So, to add to that, and the reason I went this route and looking at this is because I think we need to look a bit broadly when we look at the three angels' message and the dragon's strategy. We must not just plant the flag on the blue laws. Yes, by all means, that is our mission. We know what is coming with the Sabbath. But let me tell you, the way it's going to be delivered, nobody has seen yet. And we are seeing glimpses. And being in the 7-day Adventist, sitting watching these presentations and how people react to them, the possibilities in them. People don't see the dangers in them, the control that is around them. So the worshippers of the beast bear a symbolic mark of ownership and loyalty to Satan. And these metaverses have their own churches, have their own currency, like I said. Okay? That's going to translate into what we do in our economies as well. We are going to have a paperless society, a money paperless society, probably within the next 5 to 10 years. In this country, we already don't use things like checks anymore. I don't know if you use checks in your country, but South Africa did away with checks 5 years ago. It's just electronic payments and notes. And even notes at this stage are are being sort of done away with, taking it out of whatever. Although the reason we still use notes is because we have the large portion of our uh, um, folk in this country are poor. Now, they cannot use um, bank facilities that cost quite a bit of money. But I saw bank facilities, cheap bank facilities, when I was up in Africa and Malawi, which everybody had a card, and they were earning something like, say, 10, 30, $40 a month, but they had full access to things like electronic banking. So again, worship is the center core of the controversy between Christ and Satan, and it will also be the crux of the final crisis before the coming of Christ. The third angel, of course, proclaims a clear warning. Okay, and he also warns the world about the dreaded mark. He also warns the world about the dreaded mark of the beast, which is visible from on the forehead and hand. And we should take note that three angels' messages are not to be proclaimed by the church during the wilderness experience. That I found very interesting. Just from the context of this narrative, it is clear that the messages of the three angels are the end time warning to broadcast around the world by God's remnant people. The assignment to be God's messengers in the earth's final hours has been given to his remnant church. They are the ones who stand on the side of the Lamb. They are the ones who have the seal of God on their foreheads. They are the ones who worship him without reservation. Worship. They are the ones who have not corrupted nor compromised their faith by embracing the delusions of Babylon. They are the ones who stand before the throne of God, covered in righteousness of Christ because of the faith of Jesus. The final events of Earth's history play out, and God's last day people are given a special mission, the proclamation of his threefold message. It is vital importance that the world hear these messages of warning, for they include the antidote needed to survive the final attack by the great serpent, the devil. The world needs to know that Jesus is coming soon and how to prepare to meet him. Now, folks, in the heart of this book, I came across something, and I just, when you get to something and you think, wow, you know, how did I miss this? So Elder Falkenberg says, at the end of time, God's remnant, his faithful disciples living in the close of earth history, will be a commandment-keeping people, attacking God and his remnant point by point, commandment by commandment, stands Satan and his counterfeit Trinity. And I went, huh? What? I could not believe it. They persecute those who worship God and demand that the four worship-orientated commandments of God are found in the Decalogue be morphed into commands directing the world worship them instead. There are even more evidence that worship will be the testing issue during Earth's final crisis, as Satan sets up a counterfeit trinity, his own Godhead, to which he demands complete allegiance to the inhabitants of the world. We have always known that it is eyes uh, uh, upon the being being like God, but now he takes a direct action to try and bring it to pass. In Ezekiel 28:14, 17 refers, and Isaiah 14:12 to 14, as you can see on the screen there. Now, of course, what he does here is he puts it in the context of Revelation. But is it not, for me, it was absolutely ironic that this is where the church 30 years ago thought that the true end time counterfeit will be the Trinity. And what are we sitting with? A counterfeit Trinity. If that does not tell you we're in the end times, I don't know. So, we have to worship. The first angel message says we have to worship him. So at every turn, Satan and his false trinity will do all they can do to deceive and force the world to worship them instead of the true God, the Father, Jesus the Son, and their Holy Spirit. Tragically, communities and people of the world are going about their daily business and tasks, completely unaware of the great trial and crisis that lays around the corner. But God has a plan that motivated and deep loving people, His children, would know. He does not want anyone to be deceived and miss out on an eternity with Him. His plan is to send forth the three angels to warn off the world of the coming challenge. Their task will be to turn their hearts of humanity to their Maker. Their mission, their special mission of the remnant, are to be represented by these angels to proclaim the everlasting gospel and to encourage all who will listen to the worship of God and prepare themselves for the time of trouble that is now upon us. This is such an eye opener for me. You know, I've got so many books and I read so many things and I forget so many things. But this to me is one of those moments that I'm thinking, wow, you know what? We have these pieces, but they are about to come together. A church that truly believes that the Trinity is the same Trinity as the Catholic system. That is a false Trinity. And people have written about it, but they haven't actually seen it. And so that second angel's message, when it's proclaimed, there cannot be a third without the first and second. And these messages are given to the world in these books. These books are so precious. We've got some of the best literature in the world. And of course, we have the very best book in the world, being the Bible. And the third angel's message then it talks to our mission and really encourages us to go out there. And one of the things I was looking at is how to do mission next year in the cities, because I unfortunately do not have a place to go into the country. South Africa is a small country, and our rural areas are owned and occupied by various tribes, if you can put it that way. You can't just move out here and go get land somewhere. There's things like Diane was saying to me this afternoon, there's stuff we call land claims in this country, where disenfranchised people who in olden days were put off their land and other people took their land during the apartheid government now have land claims and are claiming that land back. But the problem is they don't have any money to actually do anything on the land. So those farms and everything are going to pieces. And these people live in abject poverty on these big tracts of land where nothing is happening. And if you dare to go there, you will be killed. So preparing the ground, building small groups, reaching everybody. And that is what Bible Explorations as a ministry does. That is what Advent Covenant Hope movement, our movement, does as a ministry. So, folks, the three angels message, what does it mean? Plain and simple. It's all about Jesus. And that's one of the most magnificent pictures in the Adventist library. When I look at that, I can sit and look at that for quite a while. When I saw it the first time, I actually saw it in a painting in one of the churches here in South Africa. And I stood and looked at it. And Diane, when she came to me, said, Diane, you need to come in. I said, look at this picture. Just look at the detail in this picture. See who you see there. Are you there? And so the question to you this evening is, are we there yet? Why question God? Look forward, look up, look to Jesus. And please forgive the little humor there as well. But I was thinking of Moses as well, similarly to here are we going, as Ellen White says in the vision, we are on that pathway and people are falling off the path and things are happening. I was thinking of Moses and I came across this little joke, and please forgive me. It's a serious message, but you know what? Those people also moaned all the way as they went up to Canaan. We must look at ourselves. We must move as a people together. We are a group of blessed people together. Look forward, look up, and look to Jesus. And so I thought I'd just share in closing with you some photographs again. I don't know if you know some of these people. Top left is Lee Venden and his wife, Boris Venden's son, who did, or still does, some very, very, very good sermons on Jesus and so on. I used to enjoy his stuff. He gave us the rights to his things here in South Africa. You can see in the background, that was one of our camp meeting bookshops that we had. I don't know if you know the gentleman here on the right. That's Ranko Stevanovic. Had long talks with him in 2013 when he told me about the Bible commentary that they had then already rewritten and needed Romans and Revelation. You would have seen recently that it's about a month ago, Andrews University finally released the new Seventh-day Adventist Bible commentary. Let me assure you, folks, you do not, if you read that, belong to the Seventh-day Adventist Church anymore. Your doctrine has changed. Of course, at the bottom right here,
We lost your audio, Hein.
He might have lost his electricity.
That's possible.
He said there were some storms there, so I was just wondering.
Okay. Well, that was very good. If you can hear us, fine. I'm sure he'll come back. But that was the end anyway. And we know who the last one was. That was a picture that probably made him feel bad. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off and back on. And Paul and Millie are here. I see them. There you are. Very good. Okay, give me just a minute. You guys go ahead and talk and whatever. I'll be back.
I